Scooby, Scooby-Doo, looking for you. Scooby, Scooby-Doo, where are you? All the stars are here, waiting for you. Couldn't have a show without you.
Hi, I'm Scrappy-Doo. Scrappy-Doo? We can count on you, Scooby-Doo. I know we'll catch that villain.
Welcome everyone to a very special episode of Adam the Movie Guy, where I will be talking about one of the greatest cartoons to ever been put to screen, Scooby-Doo. Now, the reason behind this show is because this month marks the 55th anniversary of the franchise, and I wanted to do a whole episode to talk about it and show some love. I'm going to break it down into multiple segments, starting with discussing the creation of the series, then listing and discussing briefly about all the sequel shows in chronological order. From there, I'll move on to discussing the 3 1980s TV movies and 4 of the 90s and early 2000s straight-to-VHS films that were responsible for giving the franchise a comeback that is still going strong to this very day. Then I will be discussing the Scooby Gang themselves and how each character has changed over the years. Then I got 2 big rants I want to go on. First, discussing a very unfairly hated character and important member of the gang. And the other rant, one incarnation of the gang that I absolutely detest. I think everyone listening knows where I'm going to go for those 2 rants. Well, let's get started first with the creation of the Scooby franchise and all their incarnations through the years. Okay, let's get started with a quick trip down memory lane. Come with me because we're going to go back to ancient times here. It was the year 1969, and a man named Fred Silverman, the head executive of daytime programming for CBS television, was looking for a show that would breathe new life into his Saturday morning lineup and get parent watch groups off his ass since they were bitching and moaning about violent content in children's programming at the time. You know, since they didn't want to be parents and take responsibility for what their kids watched, they had to police what content could be in the shows and ruin it for everybody else. Not sure if you could tell, but I hate censorship. But back on topic, Fred Silverman contacted legendary cartoon producers William Hanna and Joseph Barbera to create a new show based on a teenage rock group inspired by Archie Comics' The Archies, who, funny enough, released a real-life hit song, Sugar Sugar. Here's a few cartoons that Hanna and Barbera were responsible for in creating or had a heavy hand in. You may have heard of them. You know, Tom and Jerry, Magilla Gorilla, Adamant, Huckleberry Hound, Top Cat, Space Ghost, Johnny Quest, Yogi Bear, the Flintstones, and the Jetsons. You know, I think it's safe to say that they were up for the challenge. Originally, they called the show House of Mystery. Hanna and Barbera ended up passing the torch to writers Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, as well as artist Iwa Takamoto. They renamed the project to Who's Scared, and after some tweaks by dropping the traveling band aspect, tweaking character names and personalities, renaming the dog from Too Much to Scooby, and turning him into a Great Dane instead of a sheepdog, toning down the horror and emphasizing the comedy, and last, renaming the show from Who's Scared into Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? The show we know and loved was born and premiered its first episode titled What a Night for a Night on Saturday, September 13th, 1969 at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time on the CBS. Now, on to the second half of this segment. I'm going to go on and list every Scooby-Doo show, including the years they ran and what the general plot of each show was. First up, we have the OG, Scooby-Doo Where Are You?, which ran from 1969 to 1976 with 3 seasons. The premise is the Scooby Gang running into monsters and solving mysteries in a new location every episode, with the monsters always being a hoax. I mean, let's be honest, I really didn't have to explain that to you. You know what Scooby-Doo is. Next came the new Scooby-Doo movies, which ran from 1971 to 1973. These were hour-long episodes, and the hook was that each episode had a famous guest star, some real-life celebrities as themselves, or other famous cartoon or film characters. A couple examples include The Addams Family, The Three Stooges, Sonny and Cher, Speed Buggy, Batman and Robin, Don Knotts, the Harlem Globetrotters, and Jeannie. Yes, Jeannie from I Dream of Jeannie. These guests would join the gang on their mystery and always help them out in a jam. Next up was the Scooby-Doo Show, which ran from 1976 to 1978 and was the same concept as Where Are You? Next is Scooby-Doo's Laugh Olympics, running from 77 to 78, which has the Scooby Gang compete against other famous Hanna-Barbera characters in Olympic-style events. Following that is Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo, running from 1979 to 1980. This series introduced Scrappy-Doo, Scooby's tough nephew who idolizes him. It was retooled multiple times, such as the 1980 to 1982 run, which dropped the whole mystery gang and just kept Scooby, Shaggy, and Scrappy, dropping Fred and Velma and Daphne. They turned the show into episodes comprising of wacky shorts of the trio facing off against real monsters for the first time in the series. Next is the new Scooby and Scrappy-Doo show, later called The New Scooby-Doo Mysteries, running from 1983 to 1984. This show brought back Daphne, and on occasion Fred and Velma made special appearances. Next up is The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, which introduced the character Flim Flam and Vincent Van Ghoul to the series. It was about Scooby, Shaggy, Scrappy, and Daphne hunting ghosts to return to a demonic treasure chest that they were contained in. The show unfortunately only lasted 1 year, which was 1985, and only lasted 13 episodes, which, funny enough, is pretty hilarious. Next, we have a pup named Scooby-Doo, which featured elementary school versions of the gang done in a more comedic Tex Avery cartoony style. The show ran from 1988 to 1991. Next is What's New Scooby-Doo, running from 2002 to 2006. It acts as a sort of sequel to the series in spirit of the original Where Are You show. I mean, unfortunately they dropped Scrappy, but I'll get to him later, trust me. Next is Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue, running from 2006 to 2008. And it was about Shaggy inheriting fortune from his uncle and saving the world or some dumb shit like that. I honestly don't know. I didn't watch this one, but I heard it sucked. Next, we have one of the best incarnation of the show in terms of horror, The Mystery Incorporated, running from 2010 to 2013. This was a more serial-style format with ongoing character arcs and storylines with a heavier emphasis on horror and character drama. Next up is Be Cool Scooby-Doo, running from 2015 to 2018. This was a wacky, almost Family Guy-like incarnation of the characters with a heavy emphasis on comedy. Next is Scooby-Doo and Guess Who, which is essentially a modern-day remake of the new Scooby-Doo movies featuring a guest star in each episode. And last, and most certainly least, Velma, which began its run in 2023, and unfortunately I don't think they canceled it yet as of this episode. This is an R-rated incarnation of the Scooby Gang featuring gore, profanity, nudity, and sexual situations. You're probably thinking, oh, I bet Adam loved this one. Well, I fucking hated it. Everything I mentioned, I would have been fine with if it wasn't for one glaring issue with the show. No one is likable. And I'm going to touch on this in my rant section later on in the episode. But that's all I got for this segment. Let's get into the next one. Alright, let's get into the direct-to-home video era, starting with the 1980s trio of TV movies. First up is 1987's Scooby-Doo meets the Boo Brothers. The story is Shaggy's uncle, Colonel Beauregard, passes away and leaves Shaggy his old country estate, which was a southern plantation mansion. With Scooby and Scrappy along with him, they deal with ghosts, escaped animals, a trigger-happy neighbor with a horny sister that wants to screw Shaggy, and apparently they've been enemies with said family for decades. The sheriff, who is literally one of the biggest southern sheriff stereotypes you can think of. I mean, the guy's name is Rufus, for Christ's sakes. And with the main crux of the plot being that the main three, Shaggy, Scooby, and Scrappy, are going on a treasure hunt to find the Beauregard family jewels hidden somewhere on the estate. The Boo Brothers themselves are a trio of three ghosts who are actually allied to our main three, with them basically being the Three Stooges and completely incompetent when it comes to doing their jobs, which ironically is ghost hunting, which is what Shaggy hired them to do while they look for the treasure. The best part of this movie was the treasure hunting aspect, with finding the riddles to the next clue, which eventually led to the treasure. This was my favorite Scooby-Doo growing up as a kid. Scooby-Doo movie growing up as a kid. And always was an October watch for me to help kick off the season. Next up is Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, releasing in 1988. The plot is that Scooby, Shaggy, and Scrappy get jobs at a private boarding school for girls as physical education instructors. The twist? The girls are all monsters and daughters of famous movie characters such as Dracula, the Wolfman, Frankenstein Monster, the Mummy, and Phantom of the Opera. Our main three are tasked to get the girls in shape to compete in the annual volleyball match against their next-door rival school, Callaway Military Academy for Boys. Things get dangerous as an evil witch plans to kidnap the girls and steal their power, and it's up to Shaggy, Scooby, and Scrappy to save them. This was a great movie. It was my sister Ashley's favorite of the TV Scooby movies growing up. The design and personalities of the girls was very memorable, and I hope they get brought back someday. And last but not least, Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf, releasing the same year of 1988. The story is that Dracula is hosting an annual race between every famous monster, but needs a new werewolf, which, unfortunately for Shaggy, he's chosen to fill that spot, with the prize being if he wins the race, he will be returned to his human self. The movie is essentially wacky races with just monsters and Scooby-Doo characters. Oh, and Shaggy, for some reason in this movie, has a girlfriend named Googie. God knows why. I mean, she's pretty much freaking useless in this movie. I mean, I like this movie a lot, and when we finally get to the race, it's fantastic with all sorts of wacky hijinks happening. My only criticism is that instead of Googie, it would have been better if it was Daphne joining Shaggy, Scooby, and Scrappy, since she literally just had a series with them. Well, that's all for the 1980s TV movies. Let's move forward in time and talk about the 90s direct-to-VHS films that gave Scooby-Doo the comeback that's still going strong to this day. Now, for young listeners, you probably don't know what the hell I was talking about when I said VHS, which makes me very, very, very old. But anyway, let's start off with the first movie in the series, and it's Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. What more needs to be said about this legendary Scooby-Doo movie? It's still held up to this day as the best animated film in the series for good reason. The plot is, some years have passed and the Scooby Gang have gone their separate ways. Daphne is a host of her own morning talk show, and as a surprise for her birthday, Fred calls the rest of the gang up for a reunion tour across the country to try and find real ghosts for Daphne's show. They end up at a Louisiana plantation just off the mainland that is supposedly haunted. The twist? It really is, with the gang dealing with ghosts and zombies of people who died there. This is the most horror-centric movie of the series, and it shows. My favorite aspect of the movie, and all the other three that follow to a slightly lesser extent, is that it emphasizes that the Scooby Gang is aged up to their mid to late 20s, and it shows in the more mature tone that they go for. Next is 1999's Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghosts, which features the gang accompanying famous novelist Ben Ravencroft, voiced by Tim Curry, which is incredible. You gotta see it. Anyway, they follow Ben Ravencroft to his home in Oak Haven, New England, where they uncover the mystery behind Ben's ancestor Sarah, who is accused of being a witch and haunting the town. This movie is so perfect watching back to back with Zombie Island. It screams autumn out of its pores with all the fall colors and leaves. Next is Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, coming out in the year 2000. The plot is that the Scooby Gang is down in Roswell, New Mexico, investigating reports of aliens. Meanwhile, Scooby and Shaggy find the loves of their lives, is a plot B to this movie. This is honestly my least favorite of the four and is the one I watched the least. It's not bad, just not as good as the others. Finally, we got Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase, coming out in the year 2001. The story is the Scooby Gang visits their old college friend and college student, Eric, who has invited them to see a prize-winning game he made based on their adventures from over a decade ago, from back in the original series in the 70s and early 80s. And he made a high-tech game, not only based on their exploits, but based on their early personalities from back in the day. Unfortunately, they learn of a phantom virus who's been terrorizing the campus, who came about as a side effect from the creation of the game. The gang and the virus end up being beamed into the video game, just like the Matrix movie, and now to escape the game, they have to defeat the phantom virus to beat it and get back to the real world. And unfortunately, if they die in the game, they die for real. Now, this movie has such a memorable story and unique setting among all other Scooby-Doo movies. And in the third act, when they get to the final level, they team up with their digital younger selves to face off against not only the Phantom Virus, but against some of the most famous villains from the original Scooby-Doo series from back in the day. It is fantastic and such a nostalgia trip. Final word on the Cyber Chase is that it has a video game adaptation that came out for PS1 that me and my sister Ashley love playing and is worth seeking out if you're a fan of the film. Well, that's all for this segment. Let's move on to the next, covering the characters. Okay, let's now get into the characters of the Scooby Gang as well as an honorable mention, starting with Fred Jones. Now, Fred is the leader of the Scooby Gang, and while in the original incarnation of Scooby-Doo, he acts as more of a straight man to Shaggy's wacky shtick, he has evolved over the years in a few interesting ways, whether it be emphasizing his more eccentric side when it comes to making plans and traps like the Mystery Incorporated incarnation of him, or Freddie Prinze Jr.'s interpretation of the character being more of an egocentric, lovable douche. The less said about the Velma Show interpretation of him being a racist boy child, the better. Ugh. I personally love the Freddie Prinze Jr. interpretation from the live-action films, since while he's egocentric and a bit of an airhead, he's still very likable and flawed in a very realistic way, and you could tell he still loves the gang. Sort of like Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man in a sense. Just add in a touch of that eccentric trap building and you have the ultimate version of Fred. Last thing I want to say is that Frank Welker, the voice of Fred, has played him since the original show from 1969 to this very day, even in parodies like Robot Chicken or Family Guy. Holy shit, that is incredible. And he still sounds amazing to this day. Next up is Daphne Blake. Daphne probably has the biggest evolution of the Scooby Gang. She went from being a clumsy damsel in distress to an action girl to a slightly insane young woman. One thing that is constant is that she's always there to lend her support for the gang and even be a financial backer in some cases, coming from a wealthy family. My personal favorite interpretation is the action girl who takes no shit from anyone, that came around in the 80s and was further emphasized in the 90s. Just sprinkle some of that insanity from the Be Cool Scooby-Doo version of her character, and then you would have the perfect Daphne for me. Next up is Velma Dinkley and Jinkies. What can I say about this legendary character other than she was perfect and the most consistent character since her debut in 1969. She has always been the brains of the gang and always offers logical solutions to their problems. Like Fred, the live-action version of her, played by Linda Cardellini, struck a perfect balance between her cartoon incarnations, traits, balanced with having a few insecurities and resentments for being underappreciated and uncredited for all the Scooby-Doo gang's success in mystery solving, putting her into a small conflict with Fred in the first live-action movie. Funny enough, and I'm surprised that they did this and didn't try to put more emphasis on it, is in the live-action version of the first Scooby-Doo movie, she has more chemistry with Fred than Fred does with Daphne in that movie, particularly romantic chemistry. The movie, Jesus, I lost my train of thought. The couple that the movie was pushing was Freddie and Daphne, which is what everyone always assumes that they're a couple, which honestly I'm not really a big fan of. And it's even more funny is the fact that their actors, Freddie Prinze Jr., who played Fred, and Sarah Michelle Gellar, who played Daphne, are married in real life. It's just funny how he had more chemistry with Velma in the movie than he did with his own real-life wife. The cartoon show tried to push Shaggy and Velma together, but I don't like that couple either. The Velma show even tried putting Daphne and Velma together, but that's a whole nother story. I mean, hell, I don't even like Fred and Daphne as a couple, as I said. I prefer the gang as just being very close friends. I mean, if I had to see one of them pair off together, I would want Fred and Velma together. Since the live-action movie, they had such good chemistry on their one-on-one scenes with each other. But next up, we got Norville Rogers, better known as Shaggy. Like Velma, he has stayed the most consistent in personality over the past 5 decades since he was pretty much perfect when he debuted. His loyalty to his friends is his most admirable trait, and he works as the perfect comedic duo with Scooby, as well as a comedic foil to Fred. And when it's just Shaggy, Scooby, and Scrappy, he could become the straight man with Scooby-Doo taking up the comedic role and Scrappy being that perfect medium between the two. He's been in every incarnation of the show, and with the exception of that god-awful incarnation of him in the Velma show, he's perfect as the funny, food-obsessed, loyal, lovable, cowardly lion he's been since he's been created. Next up, Scooby-Doo. What else can I say for this legend? I mean, come on. He was perfect in 1969 and is perfect today. Very similar to Shaggy in terms of personality traits, with a slightly more wise guy approach to his comedy in certain incarnations. He has been extremely Jesus Christ, I can't talk today. Oof. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, he's been extremely consistent in terms of personality traits. You can't fix what isn't broken with this character. Scooby-Doo is on a pedestal of the most famous cartoon characters and is right up there next to Fred Flintstone, Homer Simpson, Bugs Bunny, and Mickey Mouse in terms of being an icon. It's not even a debate. I'd love this dog and I'd take a freaking bullet for him despite him being fictional. And last of the main gang, we got Scrappy-Doo. Scrappy is the headstrong, adventurous, and loving nephew of Scooby-Doo. In his earliest incarnation, he had a slight Brooklyn, New Yorker type accent, which I personally loved, and it suited his character as a brawling type, which I wish that they stuck with. My favorite aspect of Scrappy is that his biggest trait is his constant love and admiration of his Uncle Scooby. He truly believes that Scooby is the bravest and toughest dog in the world, and Scrappy is pretty much the ultimate hype man. I absolutely fucking hate what the Warner Brothers did to his character and the treatment he's had over the years, but I'll get to that in my rant section. And last, and kind of least, because I honestly have mixed feelings toward this character, and I'm just only mentioning him as an honorable mention, is Scooby-Doo's cousin, Scooby-Dumb. He's a Great Dane with that's white with black spots, buck teeth, and he wears a red hat and red collar with his name tag saying Dumb, and honestly it fits. He appeared in 4 episodes of the 1976 Scooby-Doo show, and he's in the intro of said show. I mean, if you didn't guess already, his biggest personality trait is that he's really freaking stupid. Honestly, why he gets more of a pass than Scrappy is beyond me. He's way more annoying than Scrappy, and at least Scrappy is useful to the gang. I mean, in conclusion, Scooby-Dumb is the cousin Oliver of the Scooby-Doo franchise. Useless, and he doesn't contribute crap. Now, for those of you who don't get that reference, Cousin Oliver was a character in the famous 1970s show, The Brady Bunch, where he was introduced in the final season of the original run of the show, and it was canceled immediately after his introduction. You know, I find it funny how both Scooby-Doo and the Brady Bunch both debuted in 1969, and they both introduced new characters to the series after declining viewership ratings. The biggest difference being Scrappy was likable while Cousin Oliver freaking sucked. And the crucial difference is that Scrappy-Doo succeeded in keeping Scooby-Doo on the air, while Cousin Oliver is blamed for getting the Bradys canceled. Hell, even their live-action movies insulted them both, with the 90s Brady Bunch movie throwing shade to Cousin Oliver in his brief appearance at the end of the movie with him getting hit by a car off screen, and the Scooby-Doo movie making Scrappy the villain, which I'm going to go on a rant about and how it pisses me off that they did that. That's all for the character segment. Let's move on to the next. Okay, guys, welcome to the rant section, aka me at my most foul-mouthed and unhinged. Quick thing before I dive in, I want to say thanks for being patient, listening to me trail off and slur some of my words like a babbling idiot. You know, it's funny, I write a script and do all these ad-libs for these shows, but I always lose my train of thought and start tripping over my words like I've downed a few drinks or something. I mean, which, to be fair, is the case for some of these segments since I don't record all at once and do it at various times of the day. So if I flub some words or lose focus and I'm already far into a recording, I pretty much say, screw it and keep going since I hate retakes. Besides, even without alcohol, I never was very articulate anyway, and I'm hoping with my podcast, I can get better at it. But enough of that little tangent. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of the 2 big rants I want to go on, starting with what I would like to call Justice for Scrappy. Now, the character Scrappy-Doo is the most unfairly hated character in fiction, and his treatment by Warner Brothers is absolute bullshit. The biggest criticism of the character is, oh, he was annoying and he overshadowed the other members of the gang. Now, I don't know what show you assholes who make this complaint were watching, but you need to have your eyes checked and stop sniffing that horror crack you bought off the corner the previous night. Let me tell you the real reason why Scrappy gets shitted on. It's because in the 1980s, they dropped the rest of the gang, Fred, Velma, and sometimes Daphne, and took their character traits such as Fred's leadership skills, Velma's riddle solving, and Daphne's dangerous confrontations with the monster of the week, and they put them all into Scrappy. Now, if they kept the rest of the gang in the 80s and kept Scrappy's original personality with the Brooklyn, New Yorker accent intact, people wouldn't have had an issue with him. It literally got to the point that come to the 90s, they dropped his character with the exception of cartoon promos that the network was doing that were literally just insulting his character. And this all culminated in the live-action movie directed by James Gunn, making him the villain of the movie. Are you fucking kidding me? His hatred of the character was so deep, he wanted him to be a villain and wanted to kill the rest of the gang and rule the freaking world. He went into this movie wanting to destroy people's perception of Scrappy forever, and he pretty much succeeded because now to this very day, Scrappy is nothing but a punching bag for jokes whenever he's mentioned by Warner Brothers in their Scooby-Doo shows. For example, in the Mystery Incorporated show, there's a scene of Fred and Daphne coming across a statue of Scrappy-Doo, and as Daphne was about to say his name, Fred cuts her off saying they promised to never speak of him. Unfreaking believable, man. You Scrappy-Doo haters are fucking assholes, but let me tell you something. You can make your petty little jokes and run your dick licker spoon, all that fucking bile that comes out of your mouth holes, but here's one fact that no matter what you say is unquestionable. If it wasn't for Scrappy, Scooby-Doo would have been canceled in 1979, and we wouldn't have the show to this very day. So have fun coping with that knowledge, and you could all kiss my ass. Hashtag justice for Scrappy. Alright, that's the end of rant 1. Let's get to rant 2. The Velma Show. The Velma Show. Oh boy. Now, okay. I know it's easy to jump on the bandwagon on hating this show, and they had hate even when all that we had were previews, and I wanted to give it a fair chance. Having said that, the bandwagoners were absolutely correct in this case because the show takes a shit on the characters of Scooby-Doo. I was perfectly fine when they announced that for the Velma Show, it was going to be an R-rated incarnation of the gang with blood, gore, swearing, and nudity. Hell, I was actually excited since we were getting an adult-rated incarnation of the franchise. Then all that went away when I binge-watched the first season of the Velma Show, and none of the Scooby gang were likable. Velma is a social outcast, sociopathic, narcissistic, annoying bitch. Daphne is a shallow, drug-dealing, mean girl. Shaggy, who goes by his real name Norval in the show, is the biggest simp for Velma and bends over backwards for a girl that doesn't give a fuck about his feelings. And Fred. Dear God, Fred. Fred is a racist boy-child idiot who has no good qualities whatsoever in this show. Also, the show seems obsessed with talking about his small dick, which gets old really fast. And no, I'm serious, that really is a running joke in the first season of Scooby-Doo. Or, fucking hell, the Velma Show. I chuckled the first time when it was kind of fresh and new. I was like, that's kind of funny, whatever. But then when you have the whole town talking about a teenage boy's dick, it gets weird really fast. And it just stops being funny. And as for Scooby-Doo, well, he's not in the show. Yeah, you heard that right. Scooby-Doo, the mascot of the franchise, is not in the goddamn show. But you know what? That's probably for the best because the writers would have fucked him up too. But that's the end of the rant segment. Let's move on to the final segment and the closure. Okay, guys, you stuck with me through the flubs, slurring, and the unhinged rants, so let's close this out with something more heartwarming, with me saying why I love Scooby-Doo and what makes him so special. What Scooby-Doo means to me is fond childhood memories, and it's like eating your favorite comfort food. I remember when I was around 8 years old, I was sick and out of school for the last 2 days out of the week and got to stay home. On TV, on the Cartoon Network, they were having a full week of non-stop Scooby-Doo shows going through all the way to the following Monday. They would play at least 4 episodes of each Scooby-Doo series in chronological order, from Scooby-Doo Where Are You? To the then current ongoing show, What's New Scooby-Doo? And in between, they played the three 1980s TV movies that I was talking about earlier, the Boo Brothers, the Ghoul School, and the Reluctant Werewolf. And then they would go back to the beginning, but with new episodes of each series in that order. And I watched them all nonstop from Thursday morning to Sunday night. I remember my dad coming home from work during his break at the church we went to and was literally right behind our apartment just around the corner back in Illinois. He would check on me to see how I was feeling, see if I needed anything, and even watch a little Scooby-Doo with me since he grew up with the original show. My fondest memories of my dad was watching cartoons together, with Scooby-Doo being a favorite, as well as the Flintstones, Hey Arnold, and my dad, the rock star TV show Gene Simmons created. Yeah, that's right, that Gene Simmons from Kiss. As for the Scooby-Doo franchise as a whole, it's going to live on and be a cornerstone of cartoon pulp culture forever. Even if they were to stop making shows or animated films, Scooby-Doo's impact on the world of entertainment is forever cemented for bringing so much joy, love, laughs, and plenty of mystery. So, thank you, Scooby-Doo, for bringing me so much joy and teaching important life lessons such as sticking by your friends through thick and thin, helping those in need even when they may not deserve it because it's the right thing to do, fighting through your fears no matter what and facing your problems head on, and to never stop believing in the good in people even when they themselves may not see it. Thank you all for listening to the show, and I'm going to leave you with this. At the end of the day, no matter what the Scooby Gang is up to, it's going to be alright, and that they will always catch that villain.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo, here are you. You're ready